Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Grant before Vicksburg. The subheadline says, An Incident of the Late War Between the States. This article was written by J. H. Rockwell. In the latter part of 1862, when General Grant was preparing to make a movement by land to reach the rear of Vicksburg, in accordance with the plans he had made for the capture of that city, he saw that he did not have a sufficient number of men to command success, and that it was imperative that he should have 8,000 or 10,000 more. His plans had been sent to Washington and approved, but to his request for men, the answer came that he must go ahead with the force already under his command. In response to this, Grant informed the president that he could not do it, that the attempt would end in failure, and that the expedition would better be abandoned than attempted without reinforcements. Determined that the War Department should fully understand the situation, he ordered a former member of his staff, General M.D. Leggett of Ohio, then commanding one of his brigades, to proceed to Washington and lay the whole matter before Mr. Lincoln and the Secretary of War. General Leggett had a personal acquaintance with Secretary Stanton, and knew there was little hope of changing his mind when once made up, and accordingly decided to gain access to the President before the Secretary of War should forestall him by the presentation of the War Department side of the case. He therefore called upon the Secretary at 8 o'clock in the morning of the day after his arrival and said to him, "Mr. Stanton, I wish you would take me to Mr. Lincoln, introduce me to him, and let me do the talking. I don't want you to ruin my case with objections." "All right," was the response, and the call was made. General Leggett was permitted to present General Grant's idea as fully and clearly as possible while Mr. Lincoln listened. When he had concluded, the President took him in hand and gave him the most severe and critical cross-examination he had ever undergone as to the situation in the West, Grant's purposes, etc. Mr. Stanton added several questions of his own, and when he had ended, the President quietly remarked, "Well, he must have the troops, but where will you get them?" asked the Secretary. Turning to General Leggett, the President said, "How many men must he have?" 16,000, General Leggett responded. Turning to the Secretary, the President asked a series of questions as to the disposition of certain forces not then in the field. How many were at Cleveland? How many at Detroit? How many here and how many there? Until he had gone over the available force in the West and had demonstrated that 12,000 or 16,000 troops could be sent to Grant. Then Mr. Lincoln asked General Leggett when he intended to leave Washington. "At 5 p.m., the General answered. "Well, I want you until then," said Mr. Lincoln. A carriage was ordered, and the two entered it and were driven to the soldier's home, where the President was then living. Of all the questioning and close examinations General Leggett had ever experienced, those of that day were the most severe. It must be borne in mind that the Grant who was then planning so great and important a move as the reduction of Vicksburg was not the Grant of Appomattox, but only of Donelson and Henry, and known then to neither Mr. Lincoln nor fame, as in the later days. But the President was determined to learn all he could from the witness then present, and as General Leggett was loyal in heart as well as in speech to his chief, and had already had a dawning realization of the great figure Grant was to play in the Civil War, his responses were clear and to the point, and visibly impressed Mr. Lincoln, as being as true as they were complimentary. General Leggett returned to the West, and when the Union troops marched into Vicksburg, he had the honor, although suffering from severe wounds, to ride into that city at the head of the 1st Brigade, which was granted the privilege of being the first to enter, receive the surrender, and raise the Union flag. This story came from the great state of New York, being reported in the Cazenovia Republican of June 2nd, 1910. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.